Commander Thexerl crouched behind the twisted metal barrier, his forearms trembling as plasma bolts seared the air above his head. The war had raged for 3 cycles now, and still these humans refused to surrender. It defied all logic, all tactical understanding the hegemony had accumulated over centuries of conquest. "Status report," he hissed into his communicator, mandibles clicking with anxiety. "Sector 7 is holding barely," came the static-filled response. "Sector 9. We lost Sector 9 an hour ago. They're pushing through the central corridor." Thexerl's compound eyes dilated. The humans had broken through their supposedly impregnable defense line, with nothing but crude kinetic weapons and an inexplicable refusal to die properly. When the hegemony first encountered Earth, their analysts had dismissed humanity as a minor threat, a young species with primitive technology and laughably fragmented governments. They had been catastrophically wrong. A sudden explosion rocked the trench, showering debris over the cowering hegemony forces. Through the smoke and chaos, Thexerl heard something that made his chitinous exoskeleton crawl with dread. Laughter. Human laughter. It started as a low chuckle, then built into a full-throated roar of mirth that somehow carried over the screaming of plasma weapons and the thunder of artillery. The sound was wrong, fundamentally terrifyingly wrong. No rational being laughed in the face of death, especially not when outnumbered 3-1 by a technologically superior force. "Did you hear that?" whispered Sub-Commander Vexta, her voice barely audible over the din. Thexerl had heard it. They all had. The laugh seemed to echo from everywhere at once, bouncing off the trench walls and somehow growing louder with each repetition. It spoke of madness, of a species so divorced from rational self-preservation that death itself had become a joke to them. Through a gap in the barrier, Thexerl caught sight of the source. A human soldier, blood streaming from a head wound, was advancing through the no-man's land between trenches. He should have been dead. Thexerl could see at least 2 plasma burns on his torso that would have killed any hegemony warrior instantly. Instead, the human was laughing as he dragged what appeared to be an improvised explosive device behind him. "Take him down!" Thexerl shrieked, but his soldier's aim was wild, panicked. The human's laughter was infectious in the worst possible way. Not inspiring joy, but a creeping realization that they were fighting something beyond their understanding. The human reached the outer barrier and looked directly at Thexerl's position. Even through the chaos, the commander could see the soldier's eyes, bright blue and completely, utterly sane. This wasn't the madness of a broken mind. This was the calculated joy of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. "Hey, Bugface!" the human shouted in badly accented hegemony standard. "Want to know what's funny?" Before Thexerl could respond, the human triggered his device. The explosion carved a crater in the defensive line and sent 3 hegemony soldiers flying. But the human wasn't done laughing. Even as he lay dying in the rubble, his laughter continued, weaker now but still audible over the ringing in Thexerl's audio receptors. "The funny thing," the human gasped, blood frothing from his mouth, "is that you actually thought you could win." More explosions erupted along the line. Somehow, impossibly, more humans were advancing through gaps that shouldn't have existed, carrying weapons that shouldn't have been effective against hegemony armor. They were singing now, actual songs and harmonies that spoke of joy and camaraderie in the face of certain death. Thexerl's communicator crackled to life. "Commander, we're receiving reports from across the sector. The humans, they're everywhere. They've been tunneling. They've been planning. Sir, they've been playing with us." The realization hit Thexerl like a plasma bolt to the thorax. The past 3 cycles hadn't been a war of attrition. They'd been an elaborate game. The humans hadn't been struggling to survive. They'd been studying their enemy, learning their weaknesses, preparing for this moment. Every defensive position the hegemony had established, every tactical advantage they thought they'd gained, had been carefully allowed to happen. The humans had been hurting them. Another laugh echoed through the trenches, then another. Soon the air was filled with human voices raised in mirth, as if the entire species had simultaneously heard the galaxy's greatest joke. The sound was overwhelming, psychologically devastating to beings who had never learned to find humor in hopelessness.
"Fall back!"
Thexerl ordered, his voice breaking. "All units fall back to the secondary line." But as his forces scrambled to retreat, Thexerl realized the terrible truth that the human soldier had tried to tell him. There was no secondary line. The humans had already won. Not through superior firepower or tactics, but through something far more dangerous: their absolute refusal to accept defeat. They had turned their own mortality into a weapon, their pain into power, their desperation into joy. They were a species that could laugh in the face of extinction and mean it. As Thexril fled through the smoke and chaos, one thought echoed in his mind with crystalline clarity. The hegemony had made a fundamental error in their galactic calculations. They had assumed that a species' worth could be measured in technology and firepower. They had never accounted for the possibility of a species that could weaponize hope itself. Behind him, the laughter continued, growing stronger with each passing moment, promising that no matter how far the hegemony ran, humanity would follow. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that made all the difference in the galaxy. The war, Thexril realized with growing horror, had indeed been over before it began. They just hadn't been fighting the species they thought they were.